A lot of people think that the only way to really improve their English is to move to an English speaking country. And I fully understand why they think this. However, it's important to remember that there are lots of people who move to English speaking countries and never learn to speak English. There are also lots of people who have never even visited an English speaking country but speak excellent English. This is because the country that you're in is not the main thing that actually determines whether or not you improve your English. Living in an English speaking country does have big advantages. For example, more opportunities to use English with other people in your daily life. However, having those advantages does not guarantee that you will actually improve. And not having them doesn't mean that you can't improve. Because it doesn't matter how many opportunities you have. What really matters is what you actually do with the opportunities that you do have. So today we're learning what some of the advantages of living in an English speaking country really are, and what you can do to get similar results without moving abroad. The first advantage is that you probably hear real English every day. You hear what native speakers say in different situations and how different people say different things. You hear different accents, different speaking styles, and lots of different words and phrases that you'll probably never hear if you only watch teaching videos. Plus, most of what you hear is going to be natural speech, not someone speaking clearly for a YouTube channel or a news broadcast. And this is a huge advantage for improving your listening. So, how can you get a similar benefit without moving abroad? Simple. Spend more time listening to real English. Instead of watching teaching videos, watch and listen to content created for native speakers. Listen to podcasts. Watch movies. Watch TV shows. Follow English speaking TikTok creators. What's important is that you are listening to people speaking in real situations, not just one person speaking to a camera. The second advantage of living in an English speaking country is that you probably have more opportunities to use English. In your daily life, you probably use English to speak to coworkers, neighbors, friends, waiters, doctors, etc. However, this advantage really isn't as amazing as many people think it is, because these are mostly just short interactions where you repeat basically the same thing that you said the day before, and after a few months you're really not saying anything new very often. What you really need to improve more dramatically is longer conversations about different things, not just, "Hi, how are you? One cappuccino, please." However, you already have opportunities to have these conversations right now in your home country, especially when you keep in mind that the people you're speaking to don't need to be native speakers. I can almost guarantee that every one of you has at least one friend, family member, or coworker who would agree to practice speaking English with you if you just asked them. The problem is that most people just don't want to do that. Or they ask two people, those two people say no, and then they give up, when the truth is that you might need to ask 20 people before one person says yes. So that's the first thing you should do. Ask everyone you know, would you like to practice speaking English with me once or twice a week? If that doesn't work, go to a park. Sit at a table. Hold a sign that says, "Let's have a conversation in English." You might feel a little bit weird doing that, but you'll probably find someone. You can also go to a tourist destination. Look for tourists and say, "Hi, I'm trying to improve my English. Can I be a free tour guide for you today so that I can practice speaking?" Or you can just use the internet to find people. Lots of people do that. You can too. Advantage number 3 is that when you live in an English speaking country, the need to improve is often much more real. When you live somewhere where everyone speaks the same language as you might want to improve your English, but when you live somewhere where you don't speak the language as well as everyone else does, there are going to be times where you feel really frustrated. And for many people, that frustration can be a very strong source of motivation. Because of that, they often spend much more time studying and practicing than they would have if they had stayed in their home country and never experienced those negative situations. And although it won't be exactly the same, you don't need to move abroad just to create this type of pressure. One thing you can do is start posting videos of yourself speaking English on your Facebook page, or even create your own YouTube channel. Every day, spend a few minutes talking about whatever you want to talk about, and then upload it. And honestly, this one might not work for everyone, but if you are someone who doesn't like making mistakes in front of other people, this can be an excellent way to motivate yourself to keep improving. Another thing you can do is look for jobs that require you to speak English. Again, not for everyone, because not everyone wants to switch jobs just to improve their English. However, switching jobs is still a lot less dramatic than moving to a different country. But here's one that anyone can do: set a goal and then tell people about your goal. For example, write a Facebook post that says, "I'm going to learn 20 new English words each week, and every Sunday I'm going to share 10 sentences using some of those words." When no one knows about your goal, it's very easy to say, "I don't feel like doing it this week." But when other people do know about your goal, this makes it much more likely that you will actually do it. Advantage number 4 is that you get feedback faster. When you live in an English speaking country, you can try a new word or phrase and immediately find out whether or not it works. You can very quickly learn what people understand and what people don't understand. But again, you don't need to move abroad just to get this type of feedback. To get quick feedback about your pronunciation, one thing you can do is use voice to text instead of typing with your fingers. If you've said the same thing 3 times and the phone is still writing the wrong word, you're probably pronouncing it wrong. If you want feedback about a sentence, write it somewhere on YouTube or Facebook and see if other people understand it. You might not always get a reply, but it's still a lot better than doing nothing. Or use the internet to find an English speaker who is learning your language. Language exchanges like this often don't work as well as people expect them to because neither person is actually a teacher. However, if you go into each session with a list of things that you want to ask about, they can still be a really great way to get feedback about words, sentences, and pronunciation. For example, in this situation, does it make sense to say this? In this situation, should I say it this way or should I say it this way? Am I pronouncing this word correctly? Because although they're not a teacher, they can still probably help you with questions like those. Or, if it's an option, work with a real teacher. If you can afford to work with a teacher, this is something that I am almost always going to recommend, especially since many of you have questions that normal native speakers probably aren't going to be able to answer well. And as much as I don't want to promote the use of AI can be a really good tool for language learning. Not sure if a sentence is natural or correct? Just ask it, "Is this sentence natural and correct?" Also, it's really important to remember that most native speakers are not going to correct you when you make mistakes. They might sometimes tell you that they don't understand something that you said, but they're not usually going to correct small grammar mistakes. So, for getting corrections from other people, living in the US or the UK really isn't a huge advantage. To get as much feedback as possible, you're still going to have to do some of these things that I'm mentioning here, even if you live in an English-speaking country. And the final advantage that I want to mention today is that when you live in an English-speaking country, English becomes a part of your life, not just a subject that you study. You see signs, read menus, receive messages, hear announcements. You use English to accomplish real goals. And because of that, English becomes meaningful. And when things are meaningful, they're usually easier to learn and easier to remember. So if you don't live in an English-speaking country, just try to make English a part of your daily life as much as possible. Read English books about topics that genuinely interest you. Watch movies in English. Watch the news in English. Follow English speaking creators on social media. Do your Google searches in English. Speak to your friends and family in English. Basically, any time that it's not 100% necessary to be using your first language, use English. Because the more you make English a part of your life, the less it will feel like studying and the more meaningful it will become. And this will make using English start to feel much more natural. So, can living in an English speaking country help? Yes, absolutely. However, just moving to an English speaking country and continuing to live your life as normal is not going to dramatically improve your English. In fact, if you're one of the people who constantly says, if only I lived in the US, there's a good chance that moving abroad really wouldn't help you very much. Because the truth is that the people who improve the fastest after moving abroad are often the same people who would have improved anyway, even if they had stayed in their home country. Anyway, my point with this video is that if you want to move to an English speaking country, there are advantages and it can be a really good thing to do. But it's really important to understand that it's not the location itself that causes you to improve. What really causes you to improve is the things that you feel and do more often because you are in that location. And with a little bit of effort, you can feel and do those same things from any country in the world. If you found this video useful, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel.